My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you are interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Today we interviewed Dr. Sean McMilan, an orthopedic surgeon and the president of the AOAO, a cool anagram which stands for the American Osteopathic Academy of Orthopedics. He will discuss why he feels that orthopedics is a great specialty and what being a DO brings to the profession. He will talk about his own difficult journey and how he appreciates his osteopathic background and continually pays it forward, helping osteopathic physicians accomplish their dream. What a great episode. We know you'll enjoy this one. Sean McMillan, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for having me.
So can you start by telling us what the AOAO is and a little bit about the organization and what it does?
Sure. So the AOAO stands for the American Osteopathic Academy of Orthopedics. It basically is a representation of members that are osteopathic orthopedic surgeons, and we do have some allopathic colleagues as well that have joined as associate members. One of the largest roles of the AOAO is to represent the needs and desires of its membership. And in this ever-facing change of times where we're seeing a combined ACGME, osteopathic and allopathic program, a sort of spearhead forward, it's more important than ever for us to understand what the needs are of our students, our residents, and our current members to keep the academy going.
Now, I just want to say I was looking around on the website today, and it seems like there's a lot of awesome push for getting medical students and medical residents involved. Is that right?
It is, and it's one of those things where, again, students and residents more than ever have options for where they want to spend their time, which is always limited, and where they want to spend their resources. And for those of us, especially those that are osteopathic, we never want to forget our roots. And many of our osteopathic students that are coming through right now have options that we didn't have when we were residents and when we were students. They can pick an allopathic or an osteopathic career moving forward. And I think it's really important to remain distinctly osteopathic in our considerations when we head into training of programs and residents and students, because ultimately, without the osteopathic medical schools and without remembering where we came from, we lose sight of what the future is.
Sean, can you tell us, now you're the president of the AOAO, which I love that name. It's so cool. Why did you decide to run for president? Why do you feel so close to the organization? And what does the president of the AOAO do?
In my role, I've served on the board of directors over the last decade, and this was something where I sequentially moved up. And then when my opportunity came to be able to, I guess, petition for presidency, it was granted. And as such, I get to serve our members. I got involved with the AOAO quite honestly because as I was a student looking to go into orthopedics, the AOAO was very open to me. You know, here I was a nobody student that was going to my first AOAO meeting. It was in Orlando, and I was presenting some research, and everyone took the time to talk to me. Everyone took the time to sort of understand where I was from, introduced me to program directors, people that I didn't even know. And it was just a really sort of collegial sort of environment that really inspired me to want to give that back. And I have the opportunity as an attending to work with a couple orthopedic programs here in South Jersey. And I think the ties that we have to our colleagues in training as we graduate and become attendings and our residents and our students is huge because we build that camaraderie and we show these students and we show these residents exactly who we are. And yeah, we've come from different places, but ultimately we have a common bond, which is to be the best orthopedic surgeons that we can and remain friends and serve our communities and our families.
With the combined match, with the merger of residency programs, are there separate osteopathic and allopathic boards for orthopedists, or do all orthopedic programs take the same set of boards?
Yes, that's a great question, Ian, and it's changed over the last couple of years. At this point, our residents that are in current training have the option as they head into their fourth year and their fifth year to either sit for the osteopathic certification, the allopathic certification, or they can sit for both if they so choose to. And obviously, with money being limited, most are picking just one, and nobody wants to take two and risk failing, one of them. But ultimately, as we train and educate our residents coming out, we try to explain to them they have options, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's what you feel compelled to be a part of. For myself, I firmly believe that since I trained at an osteopathic medical school and I went to an osteopathic legacy orthopedic training program, that today I would choose to take the osteopathic board examination. It still allows me to be an orthopedic surgeon anywhere in the world. I can still sit for certificates of added qualification if I go into sports or hand, meaning I can get a CAQ and extra training. But ultimately, I get to keep my roots and I get to show my community, my colleagues, and my patients that I'm proud to be an osteopathic orthopedic physician.
A follow-up question to that. If a resident goes through a historically osteopathic orthopedic program or is a DO and just decides to sit for the osteopathic orthopedic boards, and then they want to do a subspecialty, let's say they wanted to go to HSS for a spinal fellowship or something like that, would that board accreditation be accepted in a historically allopathic subspecialty training program?
That's a great question. 100%, yes. At this point, they're accepted. And you got to remember, before this merge, there were many of us, like myself, who did osteopathic residencies, took osteopathic boards, and then went on to do allopathic fellowships. And that's something that's widely accepted. And honestly, osteopathic residents have a great track record of landing fantastic allopathic fellowships in training later on for a number of reasons, but I like to think it's because we're bulldogs. We work hard, we put everything we can into it, we don't take anything for granted. So, yes, it will not preclude you from pursuing an allopathic fellowship if you sit for your osteopathic board examination.
Great answers. Really appreciate everything. My last president question. If someone's listening, say an orthopedic resident or an orthopedic osteopathic physician in practice, and they went through a historically allopathic orthopedic program, and obviously this is a loaded question, but do you think it's important for them to not only join, and correct me if this is wrong, the AOA is the American Orthopedic Association, as well as the American Osteopathic Association and the AOAO, and why?
Yeah, so it's a lot of acronyms in there, right? And the truth is this, I think ultimately, no matter where we get to in life, when we see patients in clinic, patients never look at me and ask, am I affiliated with the AAOS versus the AOAO? Am I affiliated with both? And personally, I am. I'm a part of the Orthopedic Academy, the AAOS, as well as the AOAO. But I think having the background, as we talked about earlier, of being an osteopathic trainee and being an osteopathic physician, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. There's so much that we learned that we don't even realize as osteopathic physicians in medical school and in training. And I think it's just an overall approach in orthopedics that I've had so many patients say, no one ever looked at me that way, which is, the body is a continuum. We see things not just as rotator cuffs and ACLs, Ian. We see people as a whole. So if someone's coming in with knee pain, sure, I'm taking an X-ray and I'm looking at their arthritis, but I'm looking at their feet. I'm looking at their arches. Do they have varus malalignment? Do they have pes planus? Can I get them orthotics in their shoes to offload some of their joints? These are all things that we look at as the body being one big sort of unit. And I think it's important for us to understand that that training is ingrained in us and it makes us better physicians and it lets us serve our patients even more. So the long-winded answer to that question is, yeah, I think it's important for us to maintain our ties to these different osteopathic organizations, in addition to whatever allopathic organizations that we so choose to.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just ask you some general ortho questions. So one is, I think if I end up speaking to 100 pre-medical students, 90 of them want to go into either dermatology or orthopedics before they go to medical school. Why do you think orthopedics is such a popular specialty?
I mean, besides the fact that it's the best specialty, Ian, or we
Other
really
than
just
that, other than that, why?
So, I mean, listen, I can only give you, what made me fall in love with it. I grew up as a guy who loved sports, but I can tell you, as I started doing my clinical rotations as a third year from Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, I spent my first couple rotations in the hospital on the floors. And don't get me wrong, I love helping patients, but being around, sick patients and managing things that were chronic issues, high blood pressure and kidney disorders, it felt like I was never getting ahead. And then by serendipitous, arrangement, I ended up in an operating room with an orthopedic surgeon on a day that I wasn't supposed to even be in there. And I looked around and everyone was happy. They had music on, the nurses were laughing, the surgeons were in a good spirit. And I remember asking the guy, I said to the surgeon, I said, "So what's this patient's sort of outcome? What's he looking at?" And he says, "Well, look, everything goes right. He'll start jogging again in about 6 to 8 weeks." And I was like, "Dear God, this is great. We can make a difference in someone's life, get them back to doing what they want." And, I think orthopedics is a lot about restoring quality of life to patients, whether it's a broken hip and making someone walk again, whether it's, fixing an ACL and getting a young athlete back on the field again. I think there's a lot of physical and emotional and psychosomatic and psychological benefit to what we do. And really, when you see someone say thank you and you don't see that patient again for maybe years because you fixed their problem, I think there's something really rewarding about that. And I can't stop getting away from that high. I love the fact that I can get patients doing what they want and they say thank you and they're out the door. So to me, that's the best thing in the world. And I think the students, when they do rotations, pick up on that.
Sean, just on a downside example, my best friend is an interventional cardiologist. The guy's a badass DO and he's got a great job. He like goes in and opens up arteries, does all these valve replacements through an artery, does great stuff. But sometimes it's very stressful. If you met my friend, then you'd want to be him. But when you really look on the backside, there's a lot of hard parts to the job that he could explain, even though he loves what he does every day. Is there anything about orthopedic surgery that you think's really tough, whether it's getting into residency or when you're in practice that you think that people thinking about it as a profession need to just take a look at?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and the truth is every specialty has that downside, right? That we don't like to talk about, that we sort of gloss over and forget in the rearview mirror. Getting into orthopedics is hard. It's one of the most competitive specialties that there is, and a lot of it's because, like I mentioned, it's so great, right? But there's a reality that not everyone who applies for it is going to get it. So there's some extra work that goes in, extra long hours, extra time spent with research, extra years of training, sometimes 3 or 4 more years in other specialties. So you're losing income, you're losing time with your family and starting your life, so to speak. At the end of the day, look, surgery is surgery. Someone's trusting you to have them go to sleep, fix their problem, and wake up. And, look, failures happen. The best, surgeons in the world have rotator cuffs that re-tear and ACLs that re-tear. So that's heartbreaking when you see someone look at you where they put their entire trust in you and that failed. But very much like an NFL cornerback, you need a short memory. You need to remember how to get back on the horse and sort of fix that problem and own up to it. If it's something that went wrong on your end, and if it was something that was just the luck of the draw, explain why it happened and what the next best option is and regain their trust as a patient doctor sort of relationship that exists. I think that's the important part. So there are downsides, but I'll tell you what, there's many more upsides to me.
Awesome. Sean, we're going to again shift gears and ask about you. We want to hear a little bit about your journey. So, can you tell us where you grew up, where you went to college, and when you decided you wanted to be a doc?
Yeah, so I grew up in Sayreville, New Jersey. For those of us on the East Coast, that's the hometown of John Bon Jovi. All right, so let's keep that in mind. Grew up a big wrestling fan and sports fan. WWE was paramount in my house with my father and I. And I had a mother who, to this day, still is with us, and she's fantastic. But she had a lot of medical issues growing up, and I remember her going to different physicians when I was younger. And she would come home and she would then research. She would take out her Britannica and she would start looking up what they had said and the ins and outs and whys that she had problems with her diabetes, etc. And I remember thinking like I wanted to help my mom. And obviously, as I mentioned before, I realized very quickly once I got into medical school, I could help her with maybe her knee pain better than her diabetes. But nevertheless, I wanted to be able to be someone that patients could look to and I could make their life better. And I'll tell you what, I remember watching, the Yankees play when I was a kid, 1986, 1987, maybe. Tommy John was a left-handed pitcher. number 25, pitched for the Yankees. And anyone who's a sports fan knows the famous Tommy John surgery where they fix the elbow ligament. I'll never forget Phil Rizzuto, who was the color commentator for the Yankees at the time, talking about this miraculous Tommy John coming back from a surgery named after himself. First guy to be able to come back and throw a baseball again after tearing his elbow ligament. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I wanted to find a way to be able to help people do that, play sports again. And I'll tell you what, Ian, if I knew medicine like I knew baseball stats, I probably could have found a cure for many more orthopedic ailments by now. But just my love of sports and my ability to sort of tie that together with our current day patients, it really made this job a lot of fun.
So where'd you go to college and how'd you get on your journey?
Yeah, so I went to the College of New Jersey, which is located in Central Jersey. From there, I went over to the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. I spent a little time starting a master's year before getting into the DO class, and then ultimately doing my osteopathic training for 4 years at PCOM. From there, graduated, went right over back over the bridge to Jersey, where I was at. It was at the time UMDNJ Osteopathic, which is now Rowan Osteopathic School of Medicine, and I did my internship there before heading up to Long Island, where you're at, and I did my DO training at the old Peninsula Hospital, which was a branch of the Long Island Jewish system. So that was my orthopedic training, and then ultimately did my specialty sports fellowship at the University of Massachusetts with Brian Busconi, and that was what changed my life. I say that all the time because I got to spend time working with someone who just loved every second of every day. If you ever met someone that had just positive energy no matter what, it was Brian Busconi. We worked with the Red Sox and a bunch of colleges, and it was by far the coolest year of my life. And I can tell you, going through each step of the way, you probably remember this. We always have doubt. I remember when I was in college saying, I don't know if I can, be a doctor. I don't know if my MCAT scores would be good enough. And then when you're in medical school, you're like, I don't know if I can get in that orthopedic residency because this or that. And then when you're in residency, you're like, I don't know if I can get in that fellowship, right? But each time we all had that one person, that one backer that said, you can do this, right? And you look inside yourself, you become introspective. And it's funny because people will look at you and I and many others and say, oh, wow, look at them. They became a physician, lucky them. But no one remembers all the self-doubt, right? That went on behind the scenes and the times you cried and you wanted to give up and had to go to the gym for an extra hour just to burn some energy off.
Yeah, I definitely cried a lot. So yeah, I don't have any problem admitting that. So let's go back. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. Amazing fast forward, but just to start with, when did you first find out about osteopathic school and tell us a little bit about that application and how you picked PCOM?
Yeah, so it kind of came through again serendipitously. My mother's cardiologist was a DO, and I thought he was a great guy, great personality. I'd spent some time with him, shadowed him in the office a couple times, and just really liked him. And I asked him, I said, this says DO. Well, I'm used to what MD, what's a DO? I honestly thought like everyone else, it meant something, podiatry or whatever it might be. I didn't know what it was, right? And he explained it to me the best he could. And then I went and when I was at TCNJ, the College of New Jersey, spoke to my pre-med advisor who again said, look, there's two pathways you can go. You can go osteopathic, you can go allopathic. You need to figure out what's right for you. And as I was going sort of through that sort of process, the one thing that stuck out to me was the more osteopathic physicians I was around, my personality seemed to fit more like them, whether it was just the way they seemed more outgoing, the way they just sort of had mannerisms, the way they thought about a patient and clinical cases. And I sort of just was gravitated towards that. And then ultimately, as I mentioned, I was doing a master's year, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life to make sure that I was good enough to be a physician. And it was at PCOM, and I was around many of the medical students and the teachers there, and said, "This is it for me. This is where I want to be." And I applied early decision and got into PCOM in December, and ultimately switched gears and went over into the DO school.
And I know you already told us you love sports and WWE and all of those things when you were a kid. Did you have it in your mind when you started med school that you were going to do orthopedics, or when did that come about?
No, and that was what I was alluding to earlier. I really didn't figure it out until my third year when I was on rotations. Like I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and then when I got on my third and fourth year rotations, like I mentioned, I thought I'm going to help my mom. I'm going to look at diabetes and cardiology, etc. And I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I actually was kind of dejected a little bit. And then when I got into the operating room setting, I felt more at ease. And then from there, it was just magic when I got into that orthopedic room. just everything clicked. Everyone just elicited this energy that I hadn't felt anywhere else in my rotations to that point. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So I figured it out late. I figured it out probably halfway through my third year and switched gears. And thank God I did because I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Now, we recently interviewed a plastic surgeon who had a similar trajectory to you. He figured out that he wanted to do it late, and he made this statement that if he knew he wanted to be a plastic surgeon, he should have started in like the third grade or something. So I assume you have the same feeling, hard to get very competitive specialties. And what did you do to turn the afterburners on third year med school? And how are your applications? Did you do research? Did you do audition rotations? And tell us what the applications were like and how you ended up at Peninsula.
Yeah, so it was all the above, and to be fully transparent, I didn't end up matching until I was a PGY2. So I figured it out late. Thank God I've been doing some research anyway, because I like research. I've been doing some vascular research, and that was on my application. I did my audition rotations to your point, did well as the alternate at a couple schools. So I was number five, but all the places took number four. So I went over to UMDNJ for the year as a TRI, traditional rotating intern, and busted my butt. I would drive post call from UMDNJ over to PCOM, and I'd hang out in office hours with Jack McPhillamy, and I'd go to the OR, and then I'd go to their orthopedic conferences on Tuesday night. Then I'd come back and I'd do the same thing over at UMDNJ. And then I would drive out to Harrisburg if I could, or I'd drive anywhere I could. Anyone that had an orthopedic program, I would go post call and I would spend time and just show my face and just pray. I prayed to God more than you could ever imagine, Ian. And I'll never forget, I got a break. It was, again, back in Orlando at the Osteopathic, the AOAO annual meeting. Jack McPhillamy came up to me and said, hey, I know we didn't take you, but Peninsula, Norman Svilik has interviews next week, and I want you to introduce himself to you. So I went and met Dr. Svilik, and he was very, very, very quiet and very deliberate and just looked at me and said, Jack vouched for you. My interviews are next week. If you want a chance, show up there. And I knew nothing about the program, Ian. I called my parents from a payphone. They flew me home early from the conference, made sure I did all of my stuff, got my application together, went over all my x-rays with some colleagues to make sure I could read an x-ray, and drove up to Long Island, interviewed, and got the spot. And there was no looking back. But truly, that was a little bit of everything. That was God, that was my family, that was Jack McPhillamy doing me a solid. And I never forgot that. And that's why I think it's so important that when we meet these students now that are applying, we have compassion and empathy, right? Because we all remember ourselves now as attendings, but there's so many kids that are so nervous and never going to get what they want. So even if I have an applicant who's not the greatest in the world, I'll take the time to talk to them about what they can do and options and how they can improve their application. And if I have a rock star, I'll make sure I tell them too that they're great, but don't let it go to your head. But I think it's important to realize that we're all people at the end of the day, and we all just want to do what is best for ourselves and our families. And I think that's something that's really, really unique about what we have the opportunity to do when we work with students.
Awesome. And then, Sean, finally, you applied for a sports medicine fellowship, and you told us you went to UMass. Now, it was that a traditionally allopathic program, and what was the application to sports medicine like out of Peninsula?
Yeah, so it was again, it's an allopathic sports medicine fellowship, and I was lucky. Brian Busconi, a very open-minded guy, had taken several DOs in the past. And again, you want to talk about the circle of life. The current fellow, when I went up to interview, was actually a former UMDNJ resident, and I remembered him. He remembered me. He remembered me from busting my butt and not getting a spot at his program. So when I got up there, we just hit it off right away and that Dr. Busconi, and I was able to tell him the truth, my journey, where I wanted to be, how I wouldn't take anything for granted, and how I always wanted to be in New England and spend a year and work with the hated Red Sox, right? I grew up a Yankee fan in North Jersey, and we just sort of had that sort of spirit. And as you fast forward and look at things, Dr. Busconi, Brian has been open-minded and taken several osteopathic residents into his program after myself. And he's always said that one of our best attributes is we just work harder than anyone else. We have a chip on our shoulder, we take nothing for granted, and we appreciate every opportunity and we work harder. And then from there, the doors open, right? And what we do with that is up to us. And Brian Busconi a couple of years ago was actually inducted as an honorary member of the AOAO. He's given several lectures for us since. and to this day still takes osteopathic and allopathic residents into his fellowship. And we're starting a sports medicine fellowship down here at Virtua, and he's been instrumental in guiding us to make sure that we make the best possible application moving forward. So I think that is a testament to our hard work as well as the open-mindedness of some of our allopathic friends.
I think that's super nice that you gave him membership and we're so nice to him coming full circle after he was so good to you. Sean, tell us about looking for a job. So you do all of this training, you did surgical time, you did your orthopedic residency, you do a sports fellowship. How did you decide? Was it harder to get a job than to get a fellowship? Was that easy to get a job and really confusing? And how did you decide where to go?
So the answer is yes, right? I mean, I'm saying that tongue in cheek. So, the jobs are there, right? Once you're graduating, and for anyone who's out there who's in a fellowship now or maybe a resident, the jobs are always there, right? And for the first time, people want you. You're not selling yourself anymore. They're trying to sell you on coming there. So it's about fit and it's about where you want to be. We knew as a family we wanted to be back in South Jersey, so that sort of gave us a location for where we wanted to be. And then it was more about just really talking to each of the groups and understanding dynamics. Ultimately, I'm hospital employed, and I thought for myself I was going to be hospital employed for 2 years, make some money, and then figure it out and go find the group that I wanted to be with. And here I am 13 years later, still hospital employed, and I love it. And the hospital has been great as we've been able to sort of cultivate and grow, and not a traditional hospital employed program, but opportunities to be part of surgical centers, opportunities to work with residents and start fellowships, opportunities to publish and do research and different things that you just can't do when you're fully private. So I think having that sort of vision for growth has been great. And my health system Virtua has really backed me in what I want to do and my residents. But ultimately, the jobs are there. And for everyone out there looking, I think it's important to understand what's going to make you happy at the end of the day. Is it money? Is it hours? Is it location? Is it family? Can you make each of those sort of fit? And if not, can you rank them in a way that, you can sort of justify it and go to sleep at night happy? I think that's where we're at. And Ian, you probably went through the same thing, and everyone else out there did too.
Sean, your story is great. Your tenacity is great. Your dedication to the osteopathic community after coming out is amazing. And our grand finale question is, can you give us one piece of advice that you were given from someone else that you really feel has been impactful in your career and you would like to pass on to our listeners?
There's so many people that have sort of touched lives. I think the biggest thing that I was taught was treat everyone like you want to be treated, right? It's the simplest thing. We've heard that. But too many times, we walk in, we are the big bad surgeons, right? We are sort of the kings of the operating room. But the respect that we sort of show others, whether it's janitors, staff, other surgeons, colleagues, I think that's the same respect we'll get back, and people pick up on that. I've never realized how much people pick up on our own vibes as I have in the last couple of years, especially post-COVID, where things changed and people did a reality check. So for me, when I talk to my residents, I always remind them, no matter who you are, treat everyone the way you want to be treated.
That's awesome. Great advice, Sean. And just to wrap things up, if someone listening wanted to get involved in the AOAO, what would you recommend that they do?
So first things first, the website's great. AOAO.org is the best way to sort of find out all the latest happenings. We have meetings in the fall and in the spring. So there's always opportunity for allopathic and osteopathic members, as well as mid-levels, PAs and Ps, to come get some CMEs, hear some great talks, meet some great people. So that's the best way to go. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me through social media. I'm very open, as you've sort of picked up on, Ian. Happy to talk to people and get them involved as well. And we're always looking for speakers at our meetings. You do not need to be osteopathic to have a spot on the podium at our conferences. We have a great mix of osteopathic and allopathic colleagues that are presenting some of the latest research, and it's great to sort of commingle and get to know each other.
Sean, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Ian, thanks for having me.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tianyu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.